like to welcome you all to our first webinar session, which is part of a series that will be running in celebration of Women's Month in South Africa. This webinar series is organized by the Southern African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy through its Committee for the Diversity and Inclusion in the Minerals Industry, which I have the privilege of chairing. And we are doing this in collaboration with Women in Mining South Africa, WIMSA. The series will be running for the whole month of August every Tuesday at 2 p.m. and will be hosting diverse speakers who will be giving us different views on the issues of diversity and inclusion in the mining industry. I hope you will continue to join us for the rest of the month every Tuesday afternoon. Before we start, I would like to give a big thank you to the sponsors of our series, Influx. Thank you very much for the wonderful support that you have given to this initiative. Can I also then ask everyone to mute their microphones, use the Q&A tab to send through all your questions, which we'll then go through at the end of the presentation. Our speaker today is Deshnee Naidoo. I'm going to go over a biography, then give her the space to talk to us. Deshnee Naidoo is a mining executive with a diverse experience spanning 22 years. She has progressed through both the operational and corporate ranks across various functions and commodities over multiple geographies. Deshnee started her career at Anglo American Platinum in 1998, where she occupied a range of positions, including process engineer, strategic long-term planning manager, and manager corporate finance manager. She was appointed deputy head of the Anglo American Group CEO's office in 2009. In 2011, she was appointed CFO of Anglo American Thermal Coal, where she managed two commodities, thermal coal and manganese, across 3 geographies: South Africa, South America, and Australia. Deshnee was appointed CEO of Vendata Zinc International and Copper Mine Tasmania, subsidiaries of Vendata Limited, in 2014. She was responsible for operations and projects in South Africa and Namibia, the now closed Lishan Mine in Ireland, and CMT in Australia. In May 2018, Deshnee was appointed to the board of the Minerals Council South Africa. Deshnee was also appointed CEO of Konkola Copper Mine in Africa Base Metals for Vendata Resources Limited in June 2018. During her time at Vendata, Deshnee saw the execution of the iconic Hamsbeck project in the Northern Cape. During her 2-year tenure at the Mineral Council, Deshnee championed the Women in Mining Initiative, an initiative to advance the representation and development of women in the industry. We're privileged to support it, to have her giving a talk today. And just lastly, Deshnee left Vendata in May 2020 to spend time with her family while she plans her next industry move. So Deshnee, welcome, and please go ahead and give us a brief of what you want to tell us today.
Thank you, Selo, for that very comprehensive introduction. I'm going to dive straight into the presentation, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, then we are all set. So good afternoon again, Selo, fellow panelists, as well as the many invitees. I'd like to thank the SAIMM for the opportunity to participate in the DEMI online webinar series. I'm looking forward to sharing my views and engaging on a topic that I'm not only passionate about, but very driven to make the required and necessary impact that our industry needs. I'm going to narrow the focus, though, of this particular topic to gender diversity and inclusion in order to do this session justice, because the topic is pretty broad, and to also take you through, as Selo mentioned, some of the recent work that I championed at the Minerals Council South Africa. I'm going to start off with just going through a small history lesson. You know, in 1996, South Africa lifted its ban to allow women to work in underground mines. In 2002, Mining Charter 1 prescribed a 10% target of women across core operations. This was achieved in 2013. In 2018, we saw, after several iterations, that Mining Charter 3 prescribed targets from 20% to 25% from board levels to senior management all the way to labor. And yet, colleagues, you know, there are some amongst us that continue to defend the case for increased representation, development, and advancement of women in the industry. Gender balance or gender equality is the only realistic target that we as this industry needs to work towards. Turning to the next slide, I think despite the journey that I just outlined, South Africa mining remains one of the most underrepresented sector today. In 2005, the sector was at 5% and now stands at 12%, not really moving from after having achieved 10% in 2013. And as I said, really aided by the regulation of the country and not necessarily by tangible across the board D&I initiatives. The imperative for gender diversity and inclusion is understood, and facts supporting the business case is well known and documented. I mean, how many more Harvard Business Reviews, McKinsey reports, and UN studies do we need to see to accept this? And yet, this has not encouraged a greater drive and thrust in the industry. Diverse companies with diverse leadership teams return better bottom line performance, and that's a fact. Turning to the next slide, and specifically in terms of the South African landscape, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the National Development Plan 2030, and as I mentioned, Mining Charter 3 have all given us very specific goals in which to work towards. The challenge has been how mining companies have embraced the voluntary targets. We need both push and pull to make this work. Compliance to regulatory targets has assisted South Africa towards 12% representation today, but it's going to be real leadership, commitment, and drive with action now that that is required to meaningfully make the next big step change. And for everyone listening, I will make these slides available to the SAIMM for further dissemination. So fitting in with today's D&I theme, it's always good to remind ourselves about what we're talking about. Gender diversity can only truly be effective through inclusion. What we are after is inclusive diversity. So I would like to relate a small story here. In preparation for this talk, I had a conversation with my daughter about this particular slide. She's 20 years old. She's a second-year uni student going to the University of Edinburgh. And when I showed her this, because I thought it was quite a good slide, and then we discussed Verna May's famous quote that many of you might have heard. So Verna is the head of diversity and inclusion for Netflix. And she's once said on a slide like this, that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. So I thought that's a quaint way of describing it. I had my daughter tell me, "Mommy, but that's not right." She says that upon reflection that we must not confuse inclusion with tolerance. She went on to say that tolerating women in the industry or any other industry for that matter cannot be the goal. And then she said something that really resonated with me. She said for us to feel truly included right now, that instead of waiting to be asked to dance, that for women to be successful, that we need to learn to throw our own parties. And I really liked that, because I think because this industry, is being run largely by male leaders by design right now, or by circumstance, shall I say. I think we become so accustomed to waiting to be empowered as opposed to taking empowerment. I'm now going to turn specifically to some of the work that I did whilst at the Minerals Council. So whilst on the board of Minerals Council, as Selo mentioned as well, I championed with Dr. Tutula Balfour, the Women in Mining initiative. The objective was simply to enhance the representation and advancement of women in the industry, in line with the Mineral Council's strategic goal 4, which essentially talks about leading by example through transformation. The Minerals Council sees gender balance or gender equality as it does zero harm. It is not negotiable. And for me, there was no better place to get this commitment than amongst the 30 plus South African CEOs and C-suite executives that sit on the board of the Minerals Council. The contents in the slides that I'm about to talk to comes from that work. The ultimate target, as with safety and zero harm, is gender equality. The top-down target agreed to by the Minerals Council was 30% by 2025. I want to pause on that point. I mentioned at the start of this that today there's about 12% female representation across the industry on a direct sense. I also mentioned that the latest mining charter targets are between 20 to 25% across the board. So we didn't just embrace an initiative at the Minerals Council. We embraced it and said, well, for us to be successful, we do need to stretch ourselves. And that stretch came in the 30% by 2025. So to be successful, we need success in leadership commitment, in the attraction of women to the industry, in the retention of women in the industry, and very importantly, in the advancement and development of women whilst in the industry. The challenges that we've highlighted, they are not new to many of you. First one is leadership commitment across the industry varies today, from lip service to real concrete initiatives. Mining today, and I've had various conversations, we've done the workshops, we've done the surveys to back some of this up. Mining today is still seen as a men's club. Women are harassed in our industry and not adequately accommodated when they become mothers, or first when they become pregnant, and then when they are mothers of young children. Advancement today in the industry is in the hands of largely male leaders who simply don't understand, or to their defense, perhaps have not tried harder to understand. So the pockets of excellence that we put up there were a few. These are a few that we picked up through conversations, because I think another shortfall in the industry is that we don't publish a lot of the data and the stories. Not only do the individual companies not publish enough, but also as an industry, we do not publish in a consolidated form. Instead of taking you through some of those examples, wearing my previous hat, I thought I'll take you through some of the Vedanta examples that are not on this slide. So the founder of the business at Vedanta, Anil Agarwal, demanded 30% gender diversity in business excos immediately. And this was about 3 years on a Saturday morning, which was interesting and I think made us very innovative very quickly. But not only did he demand that as an immediate target, he then proceeded to start every business review by assessing progress on gender diversity. So after we would discuss HSE, zero harm, zero waste, zero discharge, we would then talk about management in place, and gender diversity will be right up there before we discussed business performance in terms of production, cost, and EBITDA. At Zing International, the business that I was in charge of for the last 5.5 years, I stopped the recruitment of men 3 years ago. So it was not a deliberate stopping the recruitment of men. What I really wanted the team to do was try harder to make sure that when we had to recruit externally, that we made sure that we tried our best to find a woman for the role. And when the team could not find a woman, they had to justify in a very structured way why that was the case. I created deputy and invitee roles across the various business unit excos to make sure that women, and more so young women, had a chair at the table. We created policies around flexible working arrangements for mothers of young children. We've even started building lactation and pause rooms to accommodate breastfeeding mothers, and enhanced policies to allow spouse family members to work. Now that's not necessarily new, but I think it's important that we did it understanding some of the conflict of interest that exists in remote geographies. We conducted mass-scale talent reviews, talent panels, to allow faster recognition and promotion of both young men and women. Gamsberg, as Selo mentioned at the start, we started in production about 18 months ago. That operation in the middle of a desert in the Northern Cape was started with over 30% gender diversity, with the average age then of less than 30 years old. The company that I left in May this year had over 20% gender diversity, from being just under 11% 5 years ago. I think the humble point that I wanted to make, that once leadership not only commits, but once leadership demands tangible targets or demands tangible results, it is in fact possible. So what are the critical success factors? It's a busy slide. I'm going to highlight a few. Firstly, to create an inclusive culture. This is not a grudge. I've used the word tolerance. I also want to use the word grudge. This is not a grudge for compliance, and neither should it be tolerance. We need to set clear leadership targets and commitments and be transparent about the tracking and monitoring of those. We need to tailor recruitment. Recruitment designed to attract a man will not do. We need to enable a safe and supportive environment, one that is fit for purpose. We need to showcase role models. I think people have a view that role models are senior people. That is not true. We need to look at people across the industry, as well as in the supporting ecosystem, to show people not only what is possible, but to learn and to appreciate the lessons in their journey, so that those that are following can go through an easier path, or at least a path that they better understand. And we need to be flexible in the development to align to the phases of a woman's life cycle. Turning to the next slide, this is the roadmap that we set out for the industry. This was put together in the beginning of March, so largely pre-COVID, just to highlight some of the points there. The diagnostic that was completed at the start was conducted through surveys, workshops, interviews with various CEOs. I think in total, the team interviewed around 12 CEOs in South Africa, all South African based. We wanted to ensure that the actions were in fact evidence-backed. So although the top-down leadership commitment is the start, we envisage companies doing their individual roadmaps of their baseline and ambition levels towards gender equality. And for the Minerals Council, who in this instance is the facilitator, to track and to hold these companies to account, and then to periodically publish and promote this initiative. When we had put this together, we had envisaged this to become an annual cycle. So many of you have spoken to me offline about the white paper that was also published at the same time. This roadmap basically articulates the actions to support the white paper that was published at the beginning of March as well. You know, the humble point that this slide illustrates is that for this initiative to be successful, we need a multiple stakeholder approach, and one that includes both men and women. So I often get asked why men are important to this initiative. I think firstly, men do occupy leadership positions in the industry. And for as long as that is the case, we need to make sure that men in leadership positions understand better. We also need for men to walk in the shoes of women so that they fully understand the plight and the rationale. But it also needs to be reciprocated. Women also need to understand what the men in the industry feel, and if they're not supportive, why. The bottom line in terms of the multiple stakeholder approach and making sure that both men and women are taken along across all levels is simply because men and women need to be allies to make this initiative successful. We have to factor in any conversation today, for that matter, the short, medium, and longer term impacts of COVID-19. We have seen all the recent headlines on how women have been more negatively impacted than men in terms of formal and informal job losses, in South Africa specifically, but around the world. And how women have increased household responsibilities during the lockdown, putting further pressure on them holding on to jobs. We've also seen the positive impact. I mean, the rise of female leaders. We all know now that, Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, Tsai Ing-wen from Taiwan, all become household names because, yet again, more data that women in leadership positions through crises have made a better impact. So staying with this, I think the first priority during the crises is to make sure that we do not let the work done to date to get to the 12% regress. We are at a critical point right now. We can either use the crises to accelerate the initiative or allow it to derail it completely. We have and are proving that remote working is a reality. I think, and that is a real driver for how to make, greater representation of women in the industry an accelerated reality. We cannot allow gender diversity and inclusion to be placed on the back burner and for women to become bigger victims in what is likely to happen as this industry survives through the crises. It is an opportune time, I believe, to leverage gender diversity and inclusion to assist the industry survive through this before we can thrive. I think because, again, just to reiterate the point, we all know that diversity does enhance performance. So in light of this, we have in the last 2-3 months repositioned the Mineral Council initiative along 3 areas. The first was governance. It's very important that when you want to focus on a matter, on an issue, you make sure that you bolster the governance, which is what we've done here through a leadership forum. So through the Minerals Council today, you have an over 10 CEO leadership forum that supports this initiative. We've agreed to elevate communication to showcase the real heroes of the pandemic and to enhance communication of the prevalent issues that we faced with. I think the point here is that it's important not only to celebrate the heroes during the pandemic, but to make sure that real stories are being told. We also wanted to focus on just getting right the foundational measures. I will speak to that just now across the industry. And many of you would have seen, the Business for South Africa work that was published about a month ago that also picked on some of the issues that this industry faces and what it needs to do. I think as the Minerals Council Women in Mining Initiative, we wanted to ensure 2 things happen. We wanted to ensure that women are at the center of the solutions that companies look for in terms of surviving through the pandemic, and that in terms of the work streams that are happening to make sure that we do come through this, stronger in terms of the structural reforms that have been called for, that women are integrated in those various work streams. So turning to those foundational measures that I spoke about, when we conceived that very comprehensive roadmap, the idea was to create foundational measures, one that levels the playing field, then to add what we called the proven measures, which basically to give us the next level improvement, and ultimately to get to gender equality, to add what we called the hidden gems. Okay, in the pandemic or through the pandemic, we realized that it's pointless to put everything on the table and make it even more difficult for group execs to embrace it. So we picked on these foundational measures. The first one there is to reaffirm zero tolerance to gender-based violence. When we launched the white paper and when we came up with the Women in Mining initiative at the Minerals Council, We also at the same time launched something called Stop the Abuse of Women campaign. A lot of good work in terms of the Minerals Council and industry then wanting to create more visibility on what was happening, wanting to bolster policies, wanting to make sure that women had voices through speak ups, etc. So instead of doing something different, the plea right now is, can we please go back and make sure that we do deliver on the commitment that we put on the table in March this year. It is, after all, everyone's responsibility to get this right. Develop a set of core policies. Policies are important. I think people think that this is just more English, etc. If you want to get this right, if you want to structurally get it right, you must make sure that there are consistent policies, not just across a company, but across the industry as part of best practice. But I think more importantly, to make sure that these are policies with teeth that can then be consistently applied. When I say teeth, policies that have consequences when not being adhered to. And there, I think what we said we'll do is create a portal through the Minerals Council where a lot of the corporates should just share what they currently do. Sharing does not happen enough in the industry today. Provide safer platforms to report issues. I think it's important that whilst we're on the journey, you can't leave it up to line management alone to get the reality of what's happening on the ground, and that it is important that men and women during this journey have a platform in which to voice real issues, to deal with the unconscious bias through workshops and training. And I think that's really the starting point, right? Due through either cultural reasons, values that we were brought up with, that we inherited within the industry, something I called institutionalized culture or DNA within the industry, we all do sit with a lot of conscious and unconscious biases. And for us to address it, we do need to understand what the issues are, what the differences are, and to deal with them. I cannot believe that this continues to come up, but in our workshops and interviews we had with various people, PPE is still a problem in the industry. And what we're calling for in the foundational measures is to standardize once and for all on the right fit for purpose PPE. Address the physical environmental challenges. So many women talk about, how from tools to machinery that does not adapt or is not adapted to their physiology. And this is not a blanketed approach of retrofitting everything, but looking at what is a real hazard, what is a real inhibitant to a woman doing her job safely and comfortably, and tackle those. And lastly, I think, as I mentioned on the reporting system, it is also important that we stay connected by making sure that there are constant dipstick surveys of understanding what is in fact happening in the industry. So why does gender diversity and inclusion matter? South African mining matters, and it is the backbone of this economy. Today, we have over 380 mines. We employ 450,000 people directly. And we all know that mining has between 12 to 15 times a multiplier impact within the communities. Last year alone, and this was a pre-COVID year, in 2019, despite the financial distress South Africa was in, mining contributed 8% to the GDP. And for many of you that remember the good old days, that's nowhere near the 2007, 2008 days where mining used to contribute just under 20%, but it is still significant. Last year alone, mining's fixed direct investment was just shy of 100 billion rands. And last year, the country's export earnings from mining was around 350 billion rands. But the industry has been in structural decline. Since 2010, we've lost over 10% of our production output, almost 50,000 jobs. And in terms of capital expenditure, today we are spending almost 50% of what we spent in 2010. So the industry competitiveness is declining. And again, from some of the work that you would have seen on Business for South Africa, industry competitiveness is declining on the back of regulatory certainty or uncertainty. electricity supply, logistical bottlenecks, geological factors. I mean, South Africa mines are old. Social license to operate, and on cost competitiveness, we've seen some of the work done. 50% of the output from South Africa mines today sit in the fourth quartile of the industry cost curve. So urgent action is required. And if we look at the themes that Business for South Africa are calling for, I mean, I resonate with them, but we do need to accelerate the support around energy, infrastructure, modernization, regulatory reform, more engagements through industry government task teams, more consolidated or integrated community investments. I think also very important to make sure that in this crisis that that exploration is further opened up. So we've all seen the data. You know, increasing gender diversity and inclusion drives business performance. And if the society that we live in looks 50-50 in terms of male and female representation, then don't we have a moral imperative to make sure that South Africa's mining industry does look similar in terms of gender equality and gender balance? So in a nutshell, we need South African mining industry to survive this crisis and in fact come through stronger so that it can thrive, given the fact that it is a backbone of this country's economy. It's a no-brainer that gender diversity and inclusion can catalyze this. The industry now has an action plan that it has adopted across the board, which, as you've seen from the slides I presented, is supported by a repositioned roadmap. And now we need to hold the industry to account to make sure that this can be delivered. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no questions. There's one, so I think it's a comment, and the comment is, no, it is a question. There is one. Deshnee, thank you for this. How do you think gender diversity initiatives can be sustained in an organization and are not dependent on the commitment of the leader in charge? Are there formal ways to entrench prior to the journey of getting all leaders to commit?
Absolutely. So I think it's the start is the leadership commitment, but if it's done through policies, through practices, you know, if it's entrenched in terms of, you know, periodic cycles of what happens in terms of recruitment on an annual basis, etc., it will be sustainable. So the simple answer is, although we need leadership commitment to get it started, or in this case, get it accelerated, it's the corporate institution in terms of the corporate machine around policies, procedures, and practices is what will make it sustainable. We keep on talking about inclusion and diversity interchangeable. Culture is important. I've mentioned push and pull. For us to be successful is when we do not have, you know, women in mining committees, where we don't have dummy committees out there, because the culture pulls to make sure that this happens on a sustainable basis.
No, absolutely, Deshnee, I definitely agree. If the culture is not right, we are going to keep struggling.
It's forced. I think it's a journey, right? It's got to be forced upfront. When I say forced, is because we always going to have detractors. You're never going to have everyone embracing it. You know, leadership with knowing it's the right thing to do kind of pushes it top down. But yeah, it's then making sure that you have a culture that wants it.
No, absolutely. We have another question. It says, how can we attract more women CEOs in mining? Are they lagging other industries?
We are. So what's interesting, in one of the slides I showed up front, I mean, although mining in totality is only 12%, but at a senior level, you know, women occupy almost 20%. From middle to senior management, you get most companies where women are between 18 to 20%. So the good news is the pipeline is there. What I found in my personal journey is that for as long as there are men in very senior positions in the country and globally, they just don't want women in those types of positions? So the simple answer is we need men in terms of boards and investors. I mean, this is what I like about investor pressure in terms of ESG. We need the demand above management teams to get more women into those positions. I know of many women like yourself, Tabile, who are knocking at the door. Women need to be given the chance. And I think to everyone out there that's thinking we've got men that are better qualified, more suitably qualified, why should we give women the chance right now? I think if you do not take a chance on a woman right now, and we could be unsuccessful, which is fine, we will not get there. So simply put, I think we just are not giving women enough of a chance at that top job.
No, I agree. Actually, I had a talk yesterday, and the comment was made is that even us women in mining are not doing enough. And my comment was, if only they knew that we are trying, it's just that we still have the layer of our male colleagues within the organizations that does make it a bit difficult to get the traction.
Well, what did I say, Tabile, about throwing your own parties to dance? So think a little bit more along those lines.
Absolutely. Then we've got another question. How does the initiative address women starting and growing businesses in the industry?
Okay, so for now it was really focused on, direct jobs within. But I think, it comes back to how much companies want to push this. I mean, we all know, again, through the charter, local procurement, as well as, female-led SMMEs are as important. I think it's going to come back to the ambition levels of various corporates in terms of what they do within the mine gates and what they do in the supplier and the community space in order to promote women. But I am a firm believer that if you want to get it right, you've got to have a dedicated approach across the mining value chain. But we wanted to start somewhere. I mean, to even make it broader, right at the start, Tabile, I was asked, to really focus us on gender mainstreaming. And as much as I wanted to, I focused on women only. So the point is valid. It all depends on the baseline of where companies are, how big the maturity levels or how big the ambition levels are right now to drive something like this. But for us to be successful, the ecosystem across the mining value chain has got to take women along across the board. So simply put there, if you do have, an SMME fund or an enterprise development fund, then if you really want to get this right, I would put more money aside, 80–70% of it, towards funding women-led businesses.
Thank you. We've actually got a couple of questions, Deshnee. So another question is, there is a big gap or lack of awareness of skills that are needed to be at a leadership level. How do we educate or develop this awareness?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I mean, formally, you can do formal, education, training, etc. I think we're not doing enough informal. So the networking events, I know that you guys have started. I spoke about, showcasing stories on people. We're not doing enough of that. I mean, I would love to spend time just telling both men and women about my journey. I think there's something that you can learn there. So there's a formal route, and that's easy through design. If you look at the, the various pillars that we put together as part of the roadmap, training was very much one of them. So we could do something more formal across the industry, but informally, we need more conversations started in terms of what women and men have gone through in their leadership journeys, so that we can close some of those, those attributes that they don't necessarily teach in formal courses.
No, I agree. So Deshnee, you mentioned that we need to hold the industry to account in order to come out better on the other side of COVID. So who holds the sector to account?
We do. So simply, I mean, depending on the hat you're wearing, because we all wear various hats, you're either sitting in a corporate, you're sitting as a supplier, you'll be sitting wearing an industry hat. I'm saying that there is a very transparent roadmap continue to ask the questions of your own companies, of Minerals Council. Where are you? What can I see? What has worked? What has not? So I'm saying for the first time, we have something tangible that we all need to understand. We need to be involved in to make sure that it is as successful as it can be. But you now have something that which you can ask questions of. We were not there before.
Yeah. And then another one is, how can we as women support other women in a working environment that is patriarchal and very patronizing?
Yeah. So this is, again, there's an informal and a formal route here. I think we can support women. I mean, we started, I know when I was at Zinc International, with the lean in circles to make sure that we gave women a voice amongst other women. But I think, you know, outside of the formal route, we just need to, and not just support women, I think we also need to support men as well, is that we have to create platforms where we can listen first before understanding what it is we need to support. I think also support in the broader sense is not just about, you know, celebration. We seem to think that if we celebrate, we're fine. I think support is in knowing that, I'm going to use Tabile because I can see her face on the screen. If there's a role out there, someone believes that Tabile is suited, she doesn't have a voice in the conversation, but you do. You would support her there. So support is broad. It can be formal. It can become institutionalized. For us to be successful as an industry, for both men and women to thrive, I want men and women to support each other more informally in these types of conversations. So to become others' ambassadors and advocates, and others would become yours.
No, I agree. And then another question is, there's a lot of emphasis on accommodating women in their childcare responsibilities. But what about the cultural shift of encouraging men to share some of the responsibilities in the home?
Yeah, so sure, another broad topic. Again, we're at the start of the journey, and I think there's something there about, let's go and have the conversation with the mothers and the grandmothers, and then the wives, to make sure that they can educate men or encourage men to do this, right? So I think there's only so much you can tackle as a formal initiative, but that is societal. There's a legacy issue there, there's historic issues, that is societal. So whereas I cannot influence all the sons and all the fathers out there just yet, let's focus on what we can influence and what we can fix. And I'm saying, for as long as we are not there on men doing more, and I'm really, you know, this is not offending any man out there, but I'm really generalizing that for as long as that does not happen, we need to accommodate a woman for the role that she continues to play, at least in the interim, as a caregiver, as a mother of various cycles of a child's lives, as well as progressing her career. So let's pick the one side for now, Tabile, but I totally agree that the other side needs to be addressed, but I need to get the grandmothers and the mothers involved in that one.
Absolutely. How do you deal with queen bee mentality in the workplace?
Sorry, how do I deal with?
Queen bee mentality. So the female in the workplace who, you know, sort of own the workplace. So the, you know, the ladies coming up sort of find it difficult to engage in the workplace. How do we deal with that?
I think my advice there is for everyone to be humble, to stay humble. And if you have someone that is not doing what they should be, coming back to what you said about how do we support each other, can we take that individual aside and humble her? So everyone needs to be humbled if we are to be successful.
Okay, so this is for you, but I'll also like to contribute to the answer. It said, dear Deshnee, what organizations can we join after university to sort of keep in touch with women role models in the industry? And there are organizations like Women in Mining South Africa, which you can join as a graduate. And, you know, Women in Mining South Africa does provide that networking platform. So that's just one of the organizations. Thanks, Deshnee.
Absolutely. But I think the the question, and I mean, maybe it's a thirst out there to be, you know, women at all levels in this organization, but especially on the entry level side, want to get more involved in the conversation, want to get more involved in shaping the industry that they're either about to join or have joined. I think we need to think about, you know, how do we give those individuals voices to try and aid this. And it could be, you know, a subcommittee of sorts, a Minerals Council, Women in Mining South Africa. But I am seeing a real thirst for women saying, well, I don't want this to happen to me. I need to be involved in the solutions that are being spoken about in boardrooms and in meetings.
No, I absolutely agree. You have principally covered corporate and industry cultural issues. While I do not downplay this area, a big problem has been to attract women to engineering. Have you had any success in this area?
Yeah. Well, in my career, yes, we have had success. I mean, if I look at Black Mountain now and the number of mechanical, electrical engineers we have is staggering. I think it's probably over 15% now. But yes, so you, whoever asked the question, I completely concur that engineering continues to look very pale male as well, as not looking gender diverse. I can't understand why though, because if you think about it, it's largely, you know, there is a lot of underground work, but it's also a lot of surface work. So maybe I haven't applied my mind, but maybe as an industry, it's something that we should focus on. And what I really wanted to see when we, you know, came up with this initiative is not only companies doing their own work and baselines to understand what roadmap they wanted, but if we really wanted to get this right, is to look at this on a discipline by discipline basis and to look at who we could push more and who we need to push less until we structurally fix things. So I don't have the answers to the root cause, but it's definitely something I'd like to look at in terms of a specific discipline model for what needs to happen within engineering.
Yeah. And this next question as well, I'd like to also contribute. It says, what strategies do we need to put in place to ensure that the empowerment of women starts at a young age? So I've seen, for example, young women who are academically smart getting lost from the system to such an extent that they're nowhere to be seen in the corporate and public leadership spaces. And I think that's a very important question. And for me, it also centers around the mentorship, the sponsorship within that organization to ensure that, you know, the young graduates are not lost in the system. Thanks, Deshnee.
Yeah. Absolutely, Tobias. I think there's more can be done on that. I mean, you know, we picked on from the leadership commitment to recruitment, retention, etc. So, you know, on the recruitment side, I think, and again, I am generalizing, but we do seem to think the job's done when we've got the graduate in the door. And that is definitely not the case. The way, and also the way we support, I think a male graduate and a female graduate also should be tailored. And I think that's really what I'm calling for. For as long as we're in the journey trying to get the numbers up, we need to tailor what we do, tailor the recruitment, tailor the mentorship, tailor the coaching. I think a step further, or a step even before that, Tabile, we also need to go into schools and we need to go into universities as well, even before that graduate accepts a role in mining, because we've seen from recent data that mining is not a career of choice for many smart mathematicians or STEM students out there. We need to understand why. So there's an extreme pipeline issue. Not only did I say mining was significant, it is in structured decline, and it's an industry that needs to work if South Africa works. We do not have young STEM students wanting to get into mining today. That has to be addressed.
No, I absolutely agree. I think, you know, that is the proactive approach, to start there at the high school level. So you hook them right there, otherwise it becomes too late. And another comment was, thank you for a transparent presentation, and thank you for supporting the girl child. And the next question is, to change male perception of women being able to do the job, is it important to ensure competency and not only numbers to ensure women are not set up to fail?
Oh, absolutely. So I didn't get the first part of that question. I just got the second part. Just repeat that, Tabile. Hello.
Thanks, Deshnee. Do you think the issues relating to pregnancy in the industry are well handled?
The issues relating to pregnancy. So in
Yes.
terms of policies, maternity policies, etc.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, you know, many, again, I'm generalizing because there are companies that have gone beyond, but companies still defer to, you know, to the basics in terms of Department of Labor guidelines here. So the answer is no. There's a lot more we can do. You know, given the nature of work that we do in terms of risk and hazards, there's a lot more we can do to prepare for changing or what a woman does during her pregnancy. There's a lot more we can do to support her during the period when she's at home. And I think especially so, there's a lot more that the industry can do from a policy point of view in terms of accommodating young mothers. My definition of a mother, so not young mothers, mothers of young children, my definition is, you know, less than 5 to 7 years. And how does the industry make sure that we can accommodate her during that period? I think quite critical. This has been a conversation that I've had since I was, my first child is now 20 years old. So this has been a conversation that I've had for the last 20 years. There's always, because of the nature of mining, you know, we're a 24/7 business. Even, you know, in enabling functions or support functions, we still need people to be, you know, on site. We still need them to give us the face time. There's always been a debate about why we could not tolerate flexi time as well as remote working. I think we've just dispelled that. So I'm going to encourage the industry not to, you know, worry about solving this for everyone. Take a leap from what we've just seen work and do something quite radical in the space of remote working or flexible working, because we've just proven that it does work. Tabile, a lot more can and should be done. And I think from the work that we did, you know, this is actually a huge deterrent for women as well coming into the industry. You know, so they might be attracted, but they're very concerned about what happens when they do have children and how the industry accommodates them.
No, I totally agree. So the next question is, female representation in mining seems to be growing in departments such as HR, finance, and less in the core functions such as mining and geology. How do organizations encourage more women to take up space in these departments?
Yeah, I think we need to ask ourselves, how did it get to that point? This was something quite interesting in the work that we did at the Minerals Council, where we call them the glass walls. Everyone knows about glass ceilings. This is where we're glass walls, right? So today in the industry, not sure how many people know the numbers, there's over 60% women in some of the support functions.
Yeah.
Okay? So I come back to the words I used earlier around grudge and tolerance, etc. So we've had these targets, you know, we've sought, and I'm using the royal we here, we've sought to find the easier way out in terms of bringing women into support functions to make us look, you know, representative, or more so make us look right in terms of Department of Labor and DMRE submissions, without actually addressing what we should have been doing, which is building the pipeline for women in core technical and operational positions. We have to figure out how do we close these gaps now in an accelerated way. So we've created the monster. And you know what? Because we're on this path of gender equality or gender balance, maybe what we then do is, from a design point of view, get some of those support functions up to 80–90%, whilst we get some of the technical operations to a staggered 20–30% over a period of time. But it's a monster that we shouldn't be proud of.
No, I agree. And then the last question for the day is, someone is interested in your opinion, and not only the diversity and inclusion aspect, but how do the different personality profiles, the Myers-Briggs skills, background, either help or hinder a woman trying to take space within the mining industry?
Yeah. So I have a very controversial view on this. As you all know, I am in a gap period right now. I've just started recently looking at more opportunities on a more dedicated basis after giving my family some face time. And I'm of the view that a lot of these personality tests are biased towards towards males. I've seen it. I've seen, the way I answer something, I know how I want to answer it, but I know the result it will give me will be the wrong result for the person looking at it. So to answer the question, there is a place for these personality profiles. I think we need to re-examine how some of these have been developed, because I'm seeing more and more surveys coming across very biased in terms of the answers being how a man would answer it rather than a woman.
No, absolutely. So before I hand over to Selo, I think from my side, thank you very much for a really informative presentation. I think we've all learned a lot. Thank you to the attendees and the participants. We had a really great turnout. So thank you very much, Deshnee. Selo?
Thank you for stepping in, Tabile.
I hope you can hear me. My neighbor is digging a borehole, so there's a lot of noise. I didn't know that he was going to be digging this evening, but I hope you can hear me now. I just want to say thank you, Tabile, for stepping in, and thank you, Deshnee, for being here to give us your views on this issue, and we really, really appreciate it. And we wish you all the best with whatever you decide to do in the future, but I hope that you'll still be active in this area and that we can always call on you to, to motivate us, and to, especially all the people that are very interested in this area. We don't want to lose people like you who are really keen on driving this agenda. And I'm sure that all of us who are here today is because we're all interested in driving this agenda in the mining sector. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, and thank you to Deshnee, and thank you to Tabile, and also thank you to SIMM for giving us this platform to have this discussion. And then thank you to WIMZA for collaborating with us, and also Implats for sponsoring this webinar series. And just a reminder also that WIMZA is also having some functions for some events for this month. I think it's called WIMZA Digital Diaries, which are happening on Thursday at 18:15. So if you're still interested, you can please tune in on Thursday for that. And next week, we'll also be having another webinar on creating a positive environment for diversity on the 11th of August. Please join us again at 2 p.m. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay well. Bye-bye.